Have you ever wondered how one of Florida's biggest theme parks came to be? Long before Disney and Universal came onto the scene, there was this place, Cypress Gardens. Maybe some of you remember it, or maybe you've been to Legoland, Florida recently and didn't even realize you were walking through a piece of history. And get this, it's no coincidence we're talking about this today. Today's actually the anniversary of Legoland's grand opening. Yep, it's been 13 years since they turned those lush gardens and old water ski shows into a Lego lover's paradise. So how does a park go from being the water ski capital of the world to a place filled with towering Lego bricks? Grab a drink, get comfortable, and let's dig into the story of how one of Florida's most iconic parks transformed into what it is today.
Welcome to Old Florida Now, where we uncover the rich history and hidden stories of the Sunshine State. Each episode will explore the people, places, and events that shaped Florida's past. Let's dive in.
All right, so let's talk about how Cypress Gardens got started. Back in the early 1930s, Dick Pope Sr. and his wife, Julie, they came across this article in Good Housekeeping, and it was about this dude who had tourists pay to see the gardens he'd built around his estate. So they're thinking, why not do something like that in Florida? Now, here's the kicker. They weren't just picking any spot for their vision. They literally decided to build their dream garden in the middle of a swamp. A lot of people thought Dick was crazy, even calling him stuff like the Swami of the Swamp, which you got to admit is kind of funny. But Dick and Julie weren't messing around. Julie had this serious green thumb, and she knew how to turn that swamp into something amazing. Together, they brought in over 8,000 different plants from like 90 different countries. I mean, this wasn't your average garden, People from all over started showing up to see what they'd created down there in Winter Haven. It was like stepping into this botanical wonderland. And all of it? It opened in 1936 for just 25 cents a ticket. So you have this amazing place full of plants and exotic flowers, but what really made Cypress Gardens stand out wasn't just the flora. They were thinking bigger, much bigger, but we'll get to that in a minute. So let's talk about one of the first big innovations at Cypress Gardens. This was back in 1938. You ever been on a boat ride through a theme park? Well, these guys were the first to do it. Dick Pope Sr. and Julie Pope introduced these electric boat tours that would glide through the tropical canals, giving visitors this chill, scenic view of the gardens. I mean, back then there weren't any thrill rides or crazy attractions, but honestly, these boat rides were a huge deal. Think about it. Florida's first theme park, and they're offering this peaceful, almost magical experience where you're surrounded by like 8,000 different plants from around the world. People came from all over just to take these rides. It was one of those early moves that really set Cypress Gardens apart. And these boats, they stuck around for decades, even got featured in the first ever widescreen movie. Kind of wild how such a simple idea became so iconic, right? And this whole concept of boat rides, it got picked up by other parks later on, like Disneyland and Busch Gardens. So in a way, this innovation paved the way for a lot of what we see today in theme parks. But Cypress Gardens was the OG for that laid back, immersive experience. Now, this is where things get pretty wild. Literally, in 1943, Cypress Gardens introduced something that would pretty much become their signature, the water ski shows. And I love this part of the story because it like totally started by accident. So here's what happened. There was this photo in the newspaper, right? It showed someone water skiing at the park. The thing is, there actually wasn't a show at the time, but some soldiers who were stationed nearby, they saw the photo and figured, hey, let's go check out this water ski thing. So they show up, and Dick Pope is off serving in World War II. His wife, Julie, being the ultimate businesswoman, quickly pulled together their kids and some friends, threw them on water skis, and boom, just like that, they had themselves a show. And I mean, we're talking about 800 soldiers showing up the next weekend to see it. Wild, right? That's how it all started. From there, the water ski shows became this huge hit. And before you knew it, Cypress Gardens was being called the water ski capital of the world. The shows were these big daredevil performances with jumps, flips, and all kinds of stunts. People couldn't get enough of it. It also got national attention. You had movie stars like Elvis Presley and Johnny Carson visiting the park. And some of the shows even ended up in movies. I think it's safe to say that these water ski shows helped put Cypress Gardens on the map. You know, it really shaped the identity of the park for decades. All right, so let's get into one of the really cool parts of Cypress Gardens history. It's Hollywood connection. I mean, this place was a legit hotspot for celebrities back in the day. During the 1940s through the 1960s, Cypress Gardens wasn't just a tourist destination. It became a favorite filming location for Hollywood. You had movies like On an Island with You and Easy to Love being shot right there. And if you've seen Easy to Love, that's the one with Esther Williams doing these incredible water ski stunts. It was all filmed in the gardens, including some crazy scenes with synchronized swimming and water ballet. You got to admit, it doesn't get more Florida than that. And it wasn't just the movies either. The park attracted some serious star power. Elvis Presley hung out there, Johnny Carson swung by, and Esther Williams practically lived there for a while, filming her famous Aqua musicals. I mean, can you imagine? You've got the king of rock and roll, Esther Williams, doing water ballet, and all of this happening in little old Winter Haven, Florida. What's cool is that Cypress Gardens didn't just play a background role. It became an icon. The natural beauty of the gardens, those vibrant flowers and the shimmering lakes made it a perfect fit for Hollywood. It was almost like the scenery stole the show, even with big names like Elvis or Esther around. That blend of star power and Florida charm really helped put Cypress Gardens on the map, not just as a tourist spot, but as a national sensation. All right, so here's a fun little story about how one of the most iconic symbols of Cypress Gardens came to be, the Southern Bells. Now, picture this. It's 1940, and Cypress Gardens gets hit by this really rough winter. We're talking a freeze so bad that a bunch of the plants, including this massive flame vine right at the park's entrance, got completely wiped out. Not exactly the first impression you want for visitors, right? So Julie Pope, who is always quick on her feet, came up with this brilliant idea. She tells one of the girls working there to put on an old-fashioned hoop skirt, like a Southern belle dress, and stand in front of that sad, dead vine. The idea was simple. If the guests had something more interesting to look at, they wouldn't even notice the damage to the plants. And it worked. People stopped caring about the dead vine. They were too busy taking pictures with the lady in the fancy dress. That was the start of a whole tradition. From then on, these Southern belles in their big, colorful hoop skirts became a permanent feature at Cypress Gardens. They were always around, greeting visitors, posing for pictures, and adding a little extra charm to the already beautiful scenery. It's funny how something that started as a quick fix for a bad freeze ended up becoming a huge part of what made Cypress Gardens so unique and memorable. And even after all these years, that image of the hoop-skirted Southern belle still pops into people's minds when they think about the park. So let's fast forward a bit to the 1980s when things started to shift at Cypress Gardens. By then, the Pope family had run the place for nearly 50 years, but with new theme parks popping up, Disney World, for example, the competition got really tough. In 1985, the Pope family sold Cypress Gardens to Harcourt Brace Jovanovich, which might sound a bit odd since they're mostly known for publishing, right? But they were on this buying spree of theme parks, picking up places like SeaWorld too. Harcourt put some serious money into Cypress Gardens, adding new attractions and shops, trying to compete with all the glitz coming from Orlando's parks. But even with the new investments, it wasn't enough to keep up with the growing theme park scene. Then in 1989, Harcourt sold Cypress Gardens to Busch Entertainment Corporation, the folks who ran Busch Gardens. Busch kept the park going and brought in more updates, but they still struggled to make it the major attraction it once was. By the mid-90s, Cypress Gardens changed hands again, and the challenges just kept coming as it faced declining attendance and increased competition from larger, flashier parks nearby. So let's talk about what happened to Cypress Gardens in the 90s and early 2000s. You know, as places like Disney World and Universal just kept growing in Orlando, poor old Cypress Gardens really started feeling the pinch. By then, Disney was this massive powerhouse and everyone wanted to see the castle, right? So, yeah, it got a little harder for Cypress Gardens to draw those big crowds like it used to. They tried to keep up. Busch Entertainment, which owned the park for a while, made some updates, but it wasn't quite enough. By the early 2000s, attendance just wasn't what it had been, and that led to some serious financial problems. In 2003, Cypress Gardens actually had to close its doors. Yeah, it was that bad. But they didn't give up. The park reopened in 2004 under new ownership with this huge push to reinvent itself. They added a water park, thrill rides, just really trying to compete with what was going on in Orlando. There was even this push to make it a mix of old and new. So they kept the gardens and the water ski shows, but also brought in roller coasters. Still, it was an uphill battle. The new additions helped a bit, but honestly, the financial difficulties kept coming. After a few more rough years, the park eventually closed for good in 2009. It's kind of a sad ending for such a legendary place that had been so important to Florida's tourism for decades. But, that wasn't quite the end of the story, since Legoland eventually came in and kept some of the old Cypress Gardens charm alive. So after Cypress Gardens closed for good in 2009, a lot of people were left wondering, what's next for this place? It had such a rich history, but the times were changing and it needed something big to stay relevant. Well, in 2010, Merlin Entertainments, the folks behind Legoland, announced this plan to transform the old park into, yep, you guessed it, Legoland, Florida. And honestly, it was kind of the perfect fit. They weren't just coming in to bulldoze everything. Merlin really made an effort to keep some of that old Cypress Gardens charm alive. They even kept the original botanical gardens and banyan tree, which had been there since 1939. So there was a bit of old mixed with the new. The park officially opened on October 15th, 2011, and it wasn't just a quick makeover. I mean, they built this entire Lego world, rides, attractions, even these crazy Lego sculptures aimed specifically at families with younger kids. But what I really love is how they didn't forget about the park's roots. They kept the iconic water ski shows, but with a Lego twist, of course. Imagine pirates made out of Lego bricks skiing across the lake. Yeah, that's a thing now. So in a way, Legoland kind of brought a new life to the space while still nodding to its past. It's like this perfect blend of nostalgia for people who remember Cypress Gardens and excitement for the new generation of families coming to experience Legoland. All right, so here's where Legoland Florida really deserves some credit. When Merlin Entertainments took over the old Cypress Gardens property, they didn't just bulldoze the past to make room for Lego bricks. They put a lot of effort into preserving some of the most iconic parts of Cypress Gardens. One of the big things they kept was the botanical gardens, 39 acres of lush greenery that had been there since the 1930s. Walking through that space with its winding paths and lakeside views, it's like stepping back in time, almost like the theme park disappears for a moment. And let me tell you, that banyan tree, it's a beast, planted way back in 1939. It's got these massive twisting roots that are just crazy to look at. It's one of those things that makes you appreciate how much history is still alive in the park today. Now they even kept the Southern Belle tradition alive, but with a twist. Instead of real life bells posing for photos in hoop skirts, they've got Lego versions of them around the gardens. It's cool little nod to the past, kind of a blend of old Cypress Gardens charm with the fun, playful energy of Legoland. And let's not forget the water ski shows. Cypress Gardens was famous for those, right? Well, Legoland put their own spin on it with Lego-themed ski shows. Yep, you've got Lego pirates skiing across the lake now. So while it's definitely a new chapter for the park, they've managed to keep some of that classic Florida flavor alive. All right, so let's talk about how Legoland Florida has evolved since it first opened in 2011. One of the biggest moves they made pretty early on was adding the water park in 2012. Now, this wasn't just like a little kiddie pool or something. It's a full-on water park with everything from wave pools to lazy rivers, where, get this, you can actually build your own Lego raft. I mean, that's pretty genius if you ask me. The whole idea behind the water park was to give families more to do, right? It gets hot down here in Florida, so a water park was kind of the perfect addition. Plus, it made the park feel more like a multi-day destination instead of just a quick one-day trip. You've got the thrill rides, you've got the Lego builds, and then you can cool off in the water. It's like the best of both worlds. And then they kept expanding with these awesome themed hotels. In 2015, they opened the first Legoland hotel, and it was a hit. right out of the gate. But they didn't stop there. In 2020, they opened the Pirate Island Hotel, which is like exactly what it sounds like, a pirate-themed hotel that's all Lego all the time. The rooms are decked out with pirate stuff. There's treasure hunts for the kids, and even the restaurants are themed. You feel like you're part of this Lego pirate adventure from the second you walk in. What I love about these additions is how they make Legoland more of a resort experience now. People are staying for multiple days, booking rooms at these crazy themed hotels and making a full vacation out of it. So, yeah, Legoland has come a long way from just being a one-day trip. They're really creating this full-on immersive Lego world. All right, so as we wrap up today's episode, I got to say there's something pretty magical about the way Legoland Florida balances its roots with all the modern Lego-filled fun. Think about it. This place started back in 1936 as a humble botanical garden dreamed up by Dick and Julie Pope, right? They turned a swamp into this stunning showcase of exotic plants and flowers from all over the world. Then it became the water ski capital of the world, attracting celebrities, movie productions, and visitors from around the globe. And now it's evolved into Legoland Florida, a world of Lego bricks and kid-friendly rides. But what's cool is that even with all these changes, they've kept the heart of Cypress Gardens alive. You can still wander through the original gardens, check out that massive banyan tree, and even catch a nod to the famous water ski shows, though now it's Lego pirates skiing across the lake. It's like you get a blend of nostalgia and something totally new all in one place. And it's for both locals who grew up visiting Cypress Gardens and newcomers experiencing it for the first time. The park offers this unique mix of old Florida charm and modern day excitement. It's not just a theme park. It's a living piece of Florida's history. Now, before I go, I got to get something off my chest. I grew up playing with Legos. Like, I was all about building castles, spaceships, you name it. So going to Legoland as an adult, yeah, I could totally appreciate the park for what it is. But there's one thing I noticed. Florida is hot, y'all, and this park, it's seriously lacking in shade and indoor attractions. If anyone from Legoland is listening, please, for the love of all things Lego, throw in some more shaded areas, maybe a few more air-conditioned spots where we can cool off between rides. Wouldn't hurt either, right? Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Old Florida Now. Until next time, take care.
Thanks for listening to Old Florida Now. Stay tuned for more stories from the Sunshine State's past. Until next time.